What's up? It's Johanna with God is Glamorous, where we learn how to live our best lives through Jesus Christ. And today we're going to be learning how to discover our purpose. So as we step into the year 2022, it's really important to make sure that we are clear on what God has called us to do, because when we're clear on this, we have a greater chance of living our life to the fullest extent possible. So one of the ways in which we are truly able to understand the purpose that God has for our life is to, number one, pray about it, and also number two, by reading the Bible. And specifically today, we're going to be taking a look at the book of Nehemiah. So I'm going to give you a few key points in which you are able to truly determine and understand what is your true purpose and calling in life. So just to give you some background regarding this book, of course, takes place in the book of Nehemiah, and the main character is a prophet named Nehemiah. So he is currently working as a high official in the Persian court. He is working as a cupbearer for the king Artaxerxes. Nehemiah gets word that Jerusalem and the people of Jerusalem and the walls of Jerusalem have been completely destroyed, and God places it on his heart to leave his high-paying and highly respected position as a cupbearer and go rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. So a little story behind this. The Israelites, they rebelled against God, and God ultimately allowed them to be conquered by the Assyrians and Babylonians. And it wasn't until later in which the Persian Empire conquered the Babylonians. So during this essential setting, all the Israelites have been held in captivity, and this is the time in which they are now going back to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. All right, so the first way in which you're able to understand the purpose that God has for you is to truly be able to distinguish between your career and your actual calling. So Nehemiah, as we mentioned before, was an actual cupbearer for the king. However, his purpose in life was to lead the charge and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. If we take a look at Jesus was a carpenter. That was his career. However, his purpose in life was to be the savior of this world. See, you may be working in a career, working in a 9-to-5, which is great, but long term, ultimately, I believe that it's really important for you to truly be able to seek out your true purpose and true destiny in life. The second way in which you're able to understand your purpose and calling in life is to truly ask yourself, what are you genuinely curious about? So in Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 2, it says, "And I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem." Verse 3, it says, "They said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire." As we can see here, Nehemiah receives the devastating news that the walls of Jerusalem have been destroyed, and this truly breaks his heart. So the third thing that I want you to realize when it comes to discovering your purpose in life is to really understand and get clear about what are you constantly thinking about and praying about and asking God for daily. When Nehemiah finds out that the walls of Jerusalem have been completely destroyed, he goes into praying and fasting and grieving for several days. So it says in Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 4, "So it was when I heard these words that I sat down and wept and mourned for many days. I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven." So we have to understand that in order to truly walk in our purpose, it's not about how much money we can make, but it's ultimately about how many people we can serve. And this is exactly what Nehemiah had in mind. He had a servant's heart, and he truly cared about the people in which he was going to start helping. So in Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 6, Nehemiah is praying to God, and this is what he says. He says, "Please let your ear be attentive and your eyes open, that you may hear the prayer of your servant, which I pray before you now, day and night, for the children of Israel, your servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Both my father's house and I have sinned." So ultimately, Nehemiah did not want to seek out and build the walls of Jerusalem for his own personal gain. He did it because he truly had a heart to serve God's people, and he truly wanted to seek out and do something greater than himself. The fifth way in which you are able to understand your true purpose and calling in life is to realize that the current position that you have now is no longer who you are defined as. And this is exactly what Nehemiah was clear on. So we all know that Nehemiah is currently a cupbearer for the Persian king. praying, but after he finished his prayer, he stated that he no longer was the person that he was originally. So in Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 11, Nehemiah specifically states, "For I was the king's cupbearer," meaning that he was the cupbearer, but he no longer is that anymore. So when you find yourself realizing that you are no longer who you used to be, chances are you are well on your way to discovering what your true potential in life is. All right, and the sixth way in which you are able to discover your true purpose and calling in life is when you are no longer fulfilled at your job and you become really, really unhappy. And also, people start to take notice. So as Nehemiah was on his job and he was fulfilling his role as a cupbearer, he became really, really sad. And the king even started to notice this. So check this verse out. So it says in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 1, "And it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, that I took the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had never been sad in his presence before." So in this verse, Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 1, Nehemiah is specifically saying, I had never been sad in the king's presence before. And in verse 2, the king takes notice. So it says, "So the king asked me, 'Why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart.'" So the king in turn asked Nehemiah, "Why do you look so sad when you're not even sick? What's going on?" So one of the ways in which you're able to truly discover your purpose and potential is when you start to just not be fulfilled at your job and you're truly seeking out and finding different ways to pursue something greater. All right, and the seventh way in which you are truly able to discover your purpose and calling in life is when you are willing to leave your high-paying position in order to pursue the venture that you can't stop thinking about. And this is exactly what happened with Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a cupbearer for the Persian king. It was a very, very high honor. It was a very, very esteemed position. However, Nehemiah was willing to leave that high-paying position in order to pursue the greater calling that God had over his life. So Nehemiah says to the king in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 5, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild." So in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 5, he specifically asked the king, his boss, if he will grant him permission to leave his high-paying job to pursue something greater. All right, and the eighth way in which you're able to determine whether or not you're walking in your purpose or your destiny is if doors just naturally start opening for you. So in order for Nehemiah to set out and do what God had called him to do and to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, he needed people to help him. He needed specific doors to be open. So he asked the king for permission. He asked the king to grant him permits and to allow him to have the resources necessary to rebuild this wall. And all his requests were granted. So check this verse out. So it says in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 8, "Furthermore, I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given to me for the governors of the region beyond the river, that they must permit me to pass through till I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he must give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, which pertains to the temple, for the city wall, and for the house that I will occupy. And the king granted them to me according to the good hand of my God upon me." So as we can see here, Nehemiah asked the king for permits, he asked for permission, he asked for specific access to raw materials, and the king granted his requests only at the true favor of God. All right, so I hope this has helped you discover the ways in which you are truly able to understand your purpose and your calling. I hope that as I was reading these specific points to you, that you have this one specific thing in mind, and ultimately that is most likely your purpose. However, make sure that you go to God with it and pray about it in determining whether or not this is the purpose and the desire and the plans that God has for you. So I want to end with a verse that takes place in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 21, where it says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." So although you may have all these dreams and desires and goals and the things that you want to fulfill, make sure you go to God and ask whether his will aligns with your desires and your plans for your life. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. I hope this has helped you. Also, if you are a Christian woman who desires to grow closer to God, be sure to join the Glam Fam community. It's 100% free, and it's a community where you just are able to just meet like-minded Christian women, network, pray together. We pray every single morning, Monday through Friday, at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have weekly Bible studies and all of that. So make sure to click the link below to join that as well. Other than that, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next week. Stay glamorous.